going to tell you how to put elbow patches on at home. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this, and I also ought to say we do have a repair service at the shop if you don't feel that you can tackle it yourself. Now, depending on how big the hole on the elbow is, there are a couple of ways of doing it. Now these two I've picked out because they have quite a substantial hole. Now this first stage that I'm going to show you, if the hole was very tiny or just a worn patch, you could miss this first stage out. Now before we go any further, I'll just tell you about the products that we use. The product that we use for the sticking patches is Bondaweb, and basically it's like a grease-proof paper that you iron onto the fabric just with a dry iron. Just iron it onto the fabric. And then you can peel off the greaseproof backing. Now I'm going to show you this, that I actually make a mark in the middle, because if this was an elbow patch and you try and peel it off at the side, you can damage the edge, and you need a really nice edge for sewing on, and you can see some of the glue bits gone. So I would put a little mark, and then it peels off like that. And then that reveals a surface, when it's ironed on with a little bit of steam, sticks. And it still retains its stretch. It's still got a bit of stretch. It's not rigid. This one is a Violin product, and it's a knitted interfacing. And again, it's got stretch. I think it's very important for elbow patches that you have stretch, because you've got a lot of movement in the elbows. And also, given that they're a worn area, you don't want, it to come away at the stitching because the patch is rigid. So this one again is ironed on. Now this one we use for the elbow patches, which we sell in the shop. So you can see they've got it on the back, and then they've been overcast around the edges so that they're neat to send you to sew on. I'm going to demonstrate with the Bondaweb now. This quite large hole, I have actually just I've tacked this on in a colour so that you can see it. I have just put a square of fabric on the inside and tacked round it that covers the hole, but we do have to check that it is not bigger than the patch that we're going to put on, because we don't want the stitching to show when the patch is on. So then I've tacked that on, and then I would machine zigzag round there, just with quite an open zigzag, just to secure it, and press it. Because we use a fabric that has some sticking properties, I don't put it on directly over a big hole, or else it would stick to the other side of the sleeve. So then we've got what you see now. The tacking will be replaced by zigzag, and you remove it. So then we're going to make the elbow patches. The elbow patches for this one will be done with the Bondaweb, so that will be ironed on. We'll draw around the templates. We do two sizes of templates. One is a smaller size, usually for ladies, and the other is a bigger size for the larger jumpers. We're going to cut out the elbow patches. You must use a cutting board for this. Don't do it on your kitchen table. And then you whiz round. You can do it with scissors. They need to be nice sharp scissors. And hey presto, you have your elbow patches. Now, with the point of your scissors, just make a little incision so that this peels off from the middle and you don't damage your edges. So now then, over the patch that you've made, and if there hasn't been a big hole and you haven't done a patch, you would quite simply just put it over the worn part. So that then is ironed on. A little bit of steam, just a few seconds, you'll soon see if it's stuck, and it doesn't make the sleeve stiff at all. It's best stitched by machine. So then you've got your elbow patch on there, and that will be finished. Now this jumper is actually a customer repair, and she particularly requested a contrast elbow patch. So when you've got the first one on, it's essential to get the second one in the same place on the opposite sleeve. Sometimes the hole is not really where you would expect it to be, but you have to put the elbow patch over the hole. So get your seams lined up here, take the sticky off there, put that on there, sticky side up, put that sleeve like that. Just lightly press it with some steam, just a few seconds, which will hold it on, and then when you take it off, it should be in the right place, and finish pressing it on. So then you've got 2 elbow patches stuck on. When you sew them on, it's difficult because you're in a narrow sleeve. Turn the sleeve inside out with your elbow patch stuck on, and then work from in here. Now this looks tricky, and to a certain extent it is, but it is a lot easier than working just from the outside. So if you try to do it by machine with your sleeve that way out, well, you just haven't got room basically. Even if you're coming in from the jumper body end, it's very difficult. So if you stick it on, then turn it wrong side out, and then put all this under your machine foot, you're going to go and do a zigzag stitch, and you would have a wider zigzag if you had a bigger patch, and just steer it round nice and gently till you get to the end. So although you're working in a small space, because you've got it wrong side out, you're less likely to catch something in underneath. You do need to be careful that you're free underneath and not catching anything in the jumper. You can hand sew these on. If you're going to sew them on by hand, the ones that we send out by post are better because it's a knitted interfacing. You've still got a hole for the needle to go through. The problem with the Bondaweb ones is that if they're stored for a long time, as these may be if they're in the shop for a while, the sticky comes away, so they're not just as stable. When we do them, and I do them like this, or if you've got some Bondaweb and you're doing it at home, you're not leaving them for a long time, for months on end or weeks on end. So we've developed this way of doing them, and if you can see, they are overcast at the edges, and it's quite a nice decorative stitch. Now this jumper again has got big holes on both sleeves. I have actually zigzagged a patch on the inside of there and tacked one of these onto it. Now I've done the tacking well inside the overcast stitch because you want to be able to get it out, obviously. Now you can machine this in the same way as these and use a zigzag that just is about the same width as the overcast stitch, and then it's not obtrusive and it still looks nice and neat. Now if you're going to do this by hand, you've got to have a bit of stretch in your stitch. The elbows are very movable. So I would do either a hand zigzag or a straight stitch just in from the end, sort of in the middle of the width of the overcast stitch, about 1/8 of an inch in. And I would do a prick stitch or a back stitch, but keep it loose so that when the sleeve's moving, it's not going to pull. Because if it's too tight, you get a situation where if the sleeve is well worn and you've still got thin bits at the edge of the patch, you would get it pulling away, and you don't want that. And you would use, unless you particularly wanted it to look contrast, you would use a same colour as the overcasting stitch has been done on. Now if you're going to machine them on, you would do exactly the same as with the other one and turn it inside out to sew it by the machine. If you're doing it by hand, you can get your hand in here so you can sew it without turning it inside out. Hopefully you then have 2 nice reconditioned jumpers that you will enjoy wearing again. Now this one had a really nice contrast on it, which is quite a popular colour combination these days, and this one has got a similar green, and it is a contrast, but it's not as much of a contrast as that. Now this one has been sewn on with a little blanket stitch, and it does make a really nice edge. If you've got it on your machine, it looks like that. This one is just an ordinary zigzag, which again, it's fine. And for those of you who haven't got any fancy stitches, this works perfectly well. If you would like to buy the ready prepared elbow patches from the shop, just email or phone. And we do really any colour that you wish for, and the 2 sizes. That's a big one as opposed to a small one, so you can see. And really, we can do almost any colour. I hope you found that helpful today.